My dear friends, urgent message to Pleiadian Starseeds. I am Indori of the Pleiadian civilization, brought to you through my dear young friend, Angulad. We have reached a nexus in the flow of the timelines of your reality at which it becomes important for you to understand certain crucial matters. You need to understand why you, as Pleiadian Starseeds, are here upon Earth, what your mission profile really is, and you need to understand why planet Earth and why now. You need then also to understand what will occur next. What's next for Earth and what's next for you. You need this information so that you can make an informed decision about where you will go next, what your next experience of life will be. There is no more important decision before you than the one I am about to inform you of. So this is crucial information. I will require your patience and your attention as I lay this all out for you and remind you of all that you once knew before you entered into incarnation here upon Earth. Firstly, why Earth? You are a Pleiadian being. You arose spiritually amongst your soul family upon the Pleiades. That is your home. And you are doing sterling work in your journey towards your ultimate awakening and ascension back into the oneness of the monad to which we belong. You are one of our brightest and best. So why are you now on Earth? Why are you amongst others who are struggling so mightily with their issues and causing themselves, each other, and their planet so much harm? Why have you been born amongst them in this barbaric place of murder and mayhem? Why have you risked becoming afflicted with the illnesses of their psyches? Because yes, it is a risk, and some of our Pleiadian brethren have indeed become afflicted. Quite a few have adopted the ways of Earth and fallen in consciousness. So there is a real danger in coming here. You knew this, yet you came anyway. Why? I shall tell you. It will be a fairly long story, and right now I shall offer you the first part of that story, the situation report on planet Earth. The story of how Earth gets to be as it is now is long and complex, enough to fill all the books in all the libraries upon the Earth. And still that will be a cursory explanation. So I won't try to give you the whole story. Instead, I will sum it up as follows. There is such a thing as a true and authentic Earth human. Beings that arose upon Earth from the Earth, just as you arose originally in the Pleiades, true Earth souls inhabiting Earth bodies. For better or for worse, the Earth human has been tinkered with, toyed with, manipulated, used and abused, and then rescued and healed and used and abused all over again countless times since the beginning of the story of the planet. And the ones that have acted upon Earth humans in this fashion have been the other, more technologically advanced galactic civilizations. If you examine the religious myths and the ancient legends that still resound in the consciousness of the planet, you find an abundance of traces of this intervention, this mighty being with his chariot of fire that came down and claimed a people and said to them, "You are my people, and I will protect you. You must just do as I say, to the letter, and worship and obey me, and I will look after you." You know what I am talking about. Almost all of the religions of the world have such a being in them. Now please, you mustn't think your dear old Adamu an atheist. I have explained in detail in the Adamu Speak series that I believe in God. I have personal and direct knowledge of the divine, and it is my desire to share that knowledge with others too. But my friends, the eternal, everlasting, one true creator of all things is far too great a being to appear to one group on Earth. one tribe on one planet in one galaxy, and say, I choose you and will help you to slay other tribes. Check with your heart. Surely you can see this to be true. But back to the narrative. What I wish you to understand is that this kind of intervention by space races did not happen once. It happened countless times. A number of them are still recorded in the myths and legends of which I spoke, but most of them predate all record of them. You have, after all, only a few thousand years of recorded history, sketchy as it is, and humanity has existed in one form or another for millions of years. There were, for example, dragon gods upon your planet hundreds of thousands of years ago. Too long ago for any actual record of them to survive, but the impact of having such blood-curdling, magnificent beings walking amongst you and flying your skies was such that it remains in your collective psyche. I could go on and on upon this subject. Truly, the deep history of planet Earth is massively complex. But that story is not why I am here today. I simply wish you to understand that Earth humanity has been through the aeons massively interfered with. So much so that they evolved without an identity. Earth humans do not know who or what they are. They have not found unity over any choices whatsoever. They cannot stand as one over anything. Now, you see, there are certain spiritual councils that order the universe. There is a council of wise and beautiful spiritual beings that order each planet, each solar system, each galaxy, and so on. And the Planetary Council for Planet Earth came to the decision a little while ago that Earth would cease to be interfered with until such time as the bearers of the light of will upon the planet, the humans, could come to unity on who and what they are, what they stand for, what they choose, what they believe in. They must decide, are they, collectively, service to other, service to self, or of unity consciousness? They must decide if their path is technological, religious, or spiritual. There are a variety of such choices, and they must make up their collective minds. And so the decision was made, and we, the Pleiadian civilization, were honored by the request that we should lead the imposition of a quarantine upon the planet until such time as humanity has made their decision. If you study your mythology, you will see a trace record of this. I am remembered in your mythology as a being called Atlas, and in your mythology, I lifted the dome of the stars from the earth in order to stop a feud between the stars. Yes, that is me. My real name is Atlas. Adamu is a title like grandfather or wise man, and I was personally involved in arranging the quarantine. The quarantine enforced by Atlas. We, Pleiadians, were asked to provide this service since we have, and I say this with a little pride but without conceit, the very best ships in the galaxy. No one could possibly enforce a quarantine better than we. Our lightships are unparalleled for speed and maneuverability and are also virtually indestructible. But I shall tell you more about that in due course. The point is, we were asked to make sure that the other space races got off the planet and stayed off. As the founder members of a federation of galactic races that join together for mutual benefit, protection, and support, we lead a group of races in a mission to create a quiet space upon Earth until Earth had come to its decision point. There was one race that didn't like that at all. They are recorded in the most ancient of your writings as the Anunnaki. But actually that word is a kind of a syncretism, as the ancients used it to refer to all the space races that were active upon planet Earth. And there were many. Back then, often quite a few space races were active in any given civilization at any time. But for the sake of convention, we'll call these particular ones that are known amongst Pleiadians as the Red Star people by the name used in your ancient writings, the Anunnaki. And it was so that these Anunnaki actually rebelled against the will of the Planetary Council, and believe it or not, went to war with us to resist being evicted from the planet. It was quite a shambles, as our primary objective was to cease all further traumatization of humanity, and they were willing to humanity as a pawn in their game of resistance. If we attacked them directly in their positions, we would cause far more traumatization than they ever had, so we would not do that. In the end, there really was only one strategy that we could use that wouldn't compromise our own mission. We couldn't get them off Earth by attacking them on Earth. We tried to blockade them in, but they just dug in and entrenched themselves even further as gods. They had little god kingdoms dotted all over the planet. And then they'd play chess with each other. But the games played out on bloody battlefields with humans as the chess pieces. This was their entertainment and sport. When they weren't teaching humans how to bow and scrape and sing songs of praise and worship to please their refined ears, they were bludgeoning masses of humans against each other. So we certainly couldn't just leave them on the planet either. Not only were they in contravention of the Planetary Council, not only had they attacked us and placed themselves on a war footing with us, but they were also behaving in a truly monstrous fashion. And so, desperate measures were called for. We attacked them where it would really hurt, their home planet. I won't get into all the intrigues, but you should understand that the Anunnaki gods that were upon the planet at the time were like minor royalty from the Red Star homeworld. Petty princes and princesses, they were left to get up to whatever they wanted, and in their boredom, they played upon the earth. When the Federation's warships arrived in the environs of the Anunnaki homeworld, their king was suddenly willing to enter into talks, suddenly very amenable, and suddenly willing to send instruction to his errant family members that they should extricate themselves from planet Earth and return home post-haste. He gave them a tight timeline, and that was that, a new perspective on the Great Flood. And all would have proceeded perfectly except one petulant little twit got it into his head to destroy all that he had built on his way out. Laughs. My friends, you shall have to forgive me. Your Adamu has seen much, and there is not much that raises my ire any more. But in retelling this story, I am brought back into the emotions that coursed through my being back then when I discovered this. One on the Anunnaki gods, in his mighty and godly fashion, decided if he had to leave Earth that he would wipe out his whole creation on his way. His own tribe, and that had worshipped him and done his every bidding, he decided to destroy, and everything else that he could possibly destroy. It's difficult not to get upset at that. He had access, you see, to certain tools that could be used for weather control, which is another long story, which if I told you, you simply would not believe me. But the point is, he manipulated the weather to bring maximal destruction upon his own people. Another of the Anunnaki, in fact, a brother to the insanely destructive one, decided to try ameliorate the harm. He warned some of the people of what his brother was planning. The result is the ancient myth of the Great Flood and the man who built the ark. The story, as it is now available to you in your various religious texts, has become profoundly mythologized, of course. In truth, the flooding was really quite localized. The whole world was not covered in water. I should hope a little deductive reasoning would make it apparent that there is not enough water on the planet to flood the planet. But there certainly is enough to cause a great deal of local flooding, a great deal of local disaster. And so it was. And so it was, too, that those that were warned had the wherewithal to build good, weatherproof boats for themselves, their families, and their domesticated livestock. To place in these boats sufficient feedstock to last out a few days of torrential rain and the massive flooding that came afterwards, and to provide a safe home base to live from once the floods had subsided. The flood must certainly have felt pretty epic to those that lived through it, though, and one can understand how the myth came to be what it is. But there were survivors, in part thanks to the warning they were given, in part thanks to the good preparations they put in place, and in part also because we were able to deactivate the weather device, which I shall just say was in space, and I shall leave it at that. We deactivated it, and the planet's weather returned to normal, and since then, we have been keeping a vigil. We have been keeping the rest of the galaxy off humanity's bit of turf, while they have slowly de-traumatized themselves, slowly began to find themselves, and slowly began to make up their own minds about who and what they are. It's been several thousand years that we have kept it up, and in that time, you have had very little interference indeed. A remarkably good quarantine has been maintained for all this time. We are not perfect. We do not draw an utterly impermeable boundary around the Earth. Sometimes something happens, and an Earth human encounters a being from another galactic civilization. This is often by mistake. Some perfectly respectful member of a race that is in support of the quarantine agreement makes an error, and their ship drops from a higher frequency into your environment, and you have a UFO event. That kind of thing happens. And then there are also some that are intentionally trying to subvert the quarantine, the Zeta Grays. You are familiar with the little gray fellows from Zeta Reticuli. They are masters of stealth. They are able to sneak in, get up to monkey business, and sneak out again without causing alarm. Not all the time, not even most of the time, but it happens often enough that there is an awareness of them upon your planet, for which we apologize. We are doing our best with them and have quite a high success rate, but not nearly perfect, I am afraid. The problem is that the ones doing these incursions are not acting under the auspices of their homeworld. They are corsairs, buccaneers. They undertake these missions at the behest of the highest bidder. And through the ages, they have occasionally managed to slip through and conduct this or that mission on behalf of some or another interested party. We have controlled them as best we can, but it is like swatting gnats. No matter how many you get, one or two always get through, and they don't mind being caught. They don't even mind having their ship destroyed in the process. They are, you see, not like you. They are a race of... The closest I can offer you is biological machines. They are intelligent, sentient beings, certainly, but there is no sense of I or of an individual self amongst them. They are the group. They have a networked group awareness. They have shared memories, so shooting one of their ships out of the sky doesn't actually kill anyone. Not in the normal sense. They will simply manufacture more, as many as they believe they need, and each will gain access to the network of information and knowledge, which is their group intelligence. But for all that, there are unfathomably complex factions within the greater group of their race, and some of those factions, numerically a very small percentage, engage in this kind of behavior. So that's a little background on the Zeta Greys. But now I need to tell you about the trigger events. A brief lifting of the quarantine and an offer. When the quarantine was put in place, it was agreed that there would be certain specific events that would cause the quarantine to be lifted in a very carefully ordered fashion. One such event occurred quite recently with the dropping of the first atomic bombs. This was the end of a period that you call the Second World War. I don't know why you call it that. There has almost never not been World War. But that is neither here nor there. When those devices exploded, you triggered the possibility of planetary self-destruction. Other planetary civilizations have utterly annihilated themselves with exactly this technology. So with those two bombs, you caused a trigger event. Delegates of a few of the main factions of the galactic civilizations were sent to speak to the leader of the nation that detonated those devices. Given the high drama of the time, it took a little time and effort to procure that meeting. But eventually, it came to pass. And the meeting, when it came, was with an ex-military man who was then leading a more or less peaceful nation. He was offered a variety of options by the various delegates. We, the Pleiadians, representing the Galactic Federation of White Light, offered him a peaceful path. In exchange for giving up this self-destructive technology and the whole path it placed humanity upon, we offered a variety of other technologies, free energy and so forth. Technologies that would lead to the betterment of all humanity. That would allow for healing, for unity. That would open the door to free and unfettered engagement with the galactic community. He declined our offer, saying he would not give up the strategic advantage that nuclear weapons presented at that crucial juncture. Though the war was officially over, what replaced it was very far from peace. There had been a very uncomfortable alliance between his nation and another during the war, and this alliance had fallen apart to be replaced with what would come to be called the Cold War. And this leader was fully engaged in the preparations for the next war. A war that is yet to come, a nuclear war. So he gave up on the best chance humanity would, quite possibly, ever have. Such was his short-sightedness. But that was the best decision he could take, given the information available to him. The Orion Group, another group, representatives of a race from Orion, and a consortium of service-to-self races, made a different offer. You see, this race is fast dying out as a result of their own genetic unviability. This is self-inflicted. They have, for aeons, been tinkering with their own genome. They are themselves GMOs, you see, and nearly everything upon their planet is genetically modified. Not that genetic modification is, per se, a bad thing. It is just a bad thing if you give yourself no way to undo what you have done. Which is what they did. They modified themselves right to the point of their own inability to reproduce. An unintended consequence of trying to genetically disable the aging process. So there they are now. A race of very old beings who live very, very long lives, but can have no children and are slowly, slowly dying out. So what do the beings from Orion want? A mulligan, a redo, a start over. And they see humanity's massively diverse and wonderfully robust genome as the perfect resource that they would like to mine. They want to splice bits of human genome back into their own to bring them back to viability as a race. And not just humanity, they also want access to Earth's animal genetics for similar purposes. In short, what they wanted was to be given access to human genetics, free rein to take samples from whomsoever they chose whenever they wanted. So they offered that fearful wartime leader the one thing that H would not be able to say no to. They wowed him and his technical advisors with technology that would place his nation at a massive strategic advantage over his enemies. And they said they would hand that technology over in exchange for the genetic mining rights they sought. They further promised that samples would be taken stealthily, that the sample's individual would never know that they had even been touched. And so that leader agreed. He thought he had struck the most marvelous bargain, but he was wrong. It was a disastrously poor bargain. Firstly, the technology was delivered without manuals or instructions. Imagine a Stone Age man begin handed a smartphone. What could he do with it? He could not even use it, let alone replicate it and make many more just like it. And so it was. The technology delivered was very advanced and would have been a massive strategic advantage, but it was incomprehensible and unusable to those that took receipt of it. All these years later, and only occasionally, does anything come out of those most secret of labs where those extraterrestrial devices continue to be examined and analyzed. The advances come out so slowly that they are quickly enough absorbed by the other nations of the world that the advantage is limited. A new perspective on alien abductions. And in exchange, that leader agreed to having the populace of his nation and his treaty nations poked and prodded and sampled, which has become something of a nightmare. You see, the population can never know that this was the agreement. How would they feel knowing they had been traded like so many heads of cattle? And though the Orions employed some of the very best of the Zeta Greys to conduct their sorties in the utmost stealth, what no one accounted for was the spiritual sensitivity of some humans. For some, it is simply not possible to hide from them that they have been sampled. You call it abducted. Though that is not a good term, you are taken, sampled, and returned. And it is all done at a higher vibration density outside of your normal flow of time. But be that as it may, still it is so that this is an unwarranted, unagreed upon intrusion into your space and violation of your body and your sense of safety. The quarantine is reinstituted. Though that wartime leader and the Orion delegation came to an agreement, that agreement was not ratified by the Planetary Council. They were willing to offer humanity a choice that would lead to them giving up their warlike ways and choosing for peace, choosing for unity. Though the planet-wide fatigue with war, followed by the shock of an atomic bomb and the devastation that followed, might just be enough to trigger a change in consciousness. They wanted humanity to make the leap to choosing a whole new timeline, a timeline of peace, healing, love, and acceptance. But humanity would have to choose. They could not again be overridden by the will of more powerful beings with more advanced technologies. That would just bring a repeat of the pre-quarantine era. So very carefully, the options were presented to just one man, the leader of the nation that had reached that technological threshold of planetary self-annihilation. And he chose wrong. He chose for fear, not love. He chose for separation, not unity. He chose for destruction, not healing. And we cannot blame him for it. Such was the situation at the time. That is what one chooses when one is in his shoes. But for all that, as I say, the treaty with Orion was not ratified by the Planetary Council. And so it was that we reinstituted the quarantine protocols and disallowed the Greys access wherever we could, which, again, is most places. But they still sneak through, and they continue to engage a variety of experiments, mostly for their Orion masters, but also for others. And so that is the sitrep, as military types like to say, the report of the situation on the ground. Until next time.